So everyone's saying that you really need 2 shoelaces, like you need it on both sides, but honestly, I figured that if you actually just have half the shoelace, it's like a lot more fuel efficient when you run. If you remember last time, which you do, obviously, because you're watching this video, which means you watched the last video because you're a good person, we got the flares to fit the door, fit the front of the car, fit the back of the car, and then we started sanding them. So let me show you where we're at right now, and then we'll get rolling. Have you ever wanted a girlfriend? Well, I can't offer you that, but I can offer you something even better. A SUPRA mug. I just released 2 new designs to my store, my first SUPRA and the 300ZX. You can pick them up in a shirt or a sweater, and let me tell you, the sweaters are super comfortable. They come in a few color options as well, so just pick what you like best. Just click on the first link in the bio. Alright, back to the video. These are the flares as they currently stand. As you can tell, there's still a lot of sanding that needs to be done. We stopped last time because I realized that if we're going to get these completely sanded, filled, primed, and on the car, it's going to take quite a bit more time. And so I wanted to get that last episode out, but this time, these little holes that you see, well, we just need to run through and do another layer of filler over top of these. Also need to clean up all these fiberglass strands that I should have masked that off. I should have seen that coming, but I didn't. And then we're going to put it back on the car, and we should have the flares primed and ready to go by the end of this episode. Emphasis on should have. Let me run you through a few steps of how we're going to address this to start, and then we can just dive right into the work. We're going to use our U-pull filler, which is better than Bondo. Pretty much what I've learned from working with body filler is anything is better than Bondo. And this you can pick up at a hardware store. There's other products you can use online or pick up online, but this I picked up and it's working really well. It sands quite easily. And we're going to spread a thin layer all the way across the flares, and I'm going to sand these down or grind this back, so we're going to have to do a layer as well on the bottom part here to fill in any gaps that are bad. So that's the direction that we're starting out on. I could keep talking all day, or hear me out, we can get some work done. I don't know where this joke was going. Let's get to work. Before we put the body filler on, I wanted to show you a couple things really quickly, just because I feel like they're important to address, and so that way you could not only learn from my mistakes, but when these issues pop up, if they even are issues, which they're really not, you won't get concerned or freak out about it. So let me show you. First off, I'm using a sponge and 40 grit sandpaper to sand. This way it gets me a flat surface, but still lets me get ever so slightly of a curve. Since the surface of these is curved a bit, it makes it so I'm not rubbing off one patch specifically. So that I like this, it really helps out a lot. But what this does is this will show me areas like in there. Now you see right in the middle of the screen where it's super patchy. That is because this is a low spot. So this needs to be filled in even more before we can go back and sand it smooth. Now I wouldn't have found this out if I was just sanding by hand, because I would have just pressed in harder until it's smooth. But this now shows me, hey, I just need to go over that a little bit more, so that way everything is even, because you can see right here, this area is a high spot where I sanded through the filler to the fiberglass, and that's fine because we have plenty behind it, but it lets me know, okay, this is high and this is low. The second thing that I want to show you are these cracks right here. Now these aren't an issue. Now you may be thinking initially, shoot, there's no support, so we can't just fill this in or it'll re-crack. We can, because we put support on the back. Now the top layer of fiberglass that got sanded off to reveal these cracks, that was just there to get the shape so we could then support it from the back. But since we have the back support, this part doesn't wiggle at all, so we're able to fill this right in, and we're not going to have any cracking later on down the road. Now this is where I want you to learn from my mistakes so you don't make the same mistake, because that would be just kind of stupid. I mentioned before how all of this had drips of fiberglass that we had to sand off, and we ground them off, but now I have to refill all of this area with body filler so I could smooth it over to make it smooth. But if I just taped this off, this wouldn't have been an issue in the first place. Once again, we go back to what I said in the first video, which was, hey, we're gonna try to do this as perfectly as we can, and there's still gonna be mistakes that are gonna be made along the way. So hey, believe it or not, mistake. I drank 9 cups of coffee this morning in order to have the energy to get through these mistakes. I'm ready to go, but I'm still upset. Why does this always happen to me? It's now time to throw body filler on these 3 pieces again. This time a much more lighter layer, so we don't need to worry about any shaping. Hopefully this will be our last layer before we start dust priming it to make things perfectly smooth, but again, no guarantees. You know, every once in a while, I kind of wonder, what am I doing? I made this discovery, or I had this thought, and I realized, you know what? I may be wasting a little bit of time. Like a lot of time. Let me explain. So I pinned the flare back up to the car just so I can get a good look at it, and I mean, it is looking really good. I am liking this. But then I was looking at the fitment of this, and I was like, okay, I gotta trim a little back, and this bottom doesn't fit up quite perfectly. I mean, even with it pushed in, there's a little gap right there in the middle that doesn't quite line up. And I was thinking to myself, does it really matter that it doesn't line up perfectly? I mean, no one's gonna see it. It's not gonna affect the way the car dries. It's very strongly bolted on, so there's no like aerodynamic part that's wind's gonna sneak in and pull the flare off. So it's like, I could just do a little bit of a shortcut, trim off the top, make it fit, and then not worry too much about the bottom part fitting. And then I was thinking, why does it matter that any of it fits? And then I realized there's actually no purpose of making these door inserts other than to say that you have them. I mean, the car's gonna always be parked when people look at it. And if for whatever reason someone like inspects the door to be like, oh, did they make an insert? Like, who cares? Like, I really can't believe that I spent a good amount of time making these when I didn't actually need to. Now, that being said, are we just gonna abandon the project? Heck no. I started this, so I'm gonna finish it. I'm gonna make this smooth and primed and looking good and everything. I committed. So we're gonna follow through in that commitment. But I have no words. Back to what actually needs to happen. Let me show you a bit of the update. So the next step of the process that we have to do is put on glazing putty. Now I realize some of you may not know what that means, so I figured I would explain it really quickly before I went ahead and applied it. Glazing putty is a super lightweight, easy to sand body filler that's a bit smoother and a bit thinner, so its purpose is to get in small pinholes. Now you can't tell, but there's pinholes all over here that we need to fill in, and so we are going to use this to put it on. Now there are two ways to apply it. One, use a piece of cardboard, and yes, you really want something this small because you're trying to push it in tightly and just cover small areas at a time. Now I'm going to put it over all of it, but I will be just essentially trying to push this into the gaps that the body filler didn't get. The second way, and it's the way I'm going to use, is use gloves. Now I always wear gloves when I work just because I'm lazy and I don't want to wash my hands, but they work really well to just get the putty and push it in hard to those areas that have divots and pinholes. So that's how you use glazing putty. We're going to apply this to every area that we use any body filler or sand in. I haven't even started putting the wide body kit on the other side. All right, so we got the pieces sanded, we got them cleaned up as in wiped down, and they're ready for prime. So we're gonna go ahead and lay on a few coats of primer, and then we're pretty much at a stopping point. So the sun's kind of blinding my eyes. It's actually a foggy day. Why is it that foggy days are like the most blinding? That's a conundrum. But let's go ahead and lay down a few layers of primer so we can go get this project finished. So with the flares done, it is time to move on to the next part of the car. Now I've never done one of these on a car before, not successfully. It's putting on a ducktail. Now it seems simple, but I want to try something a little different with this one. Before we even start, we already run into an issue. Underneath all this dust, all this black stuff, is Plasti Dip. So we need to get every little last bit of this off. Now as you can see, I already tried peeling some away. It's an absolute pain. I don't like Plasti Dip. I've made my decision here. I know I Plasti Dipped the car, but this is giving me a bunch of issues. So we need to just sit down, grind it out, and get all the Plasti Dip off the back of this car. Guys, I put the other side of the kit on. Yeah. Delete your exposed comments. So you may have seen that I was using paint stripper on the plastic dip because it was just being incredibly stubborn and would not come off. Paint stripper worked really well, but let me show you where we're at with the ducktail now because it's time to get it fitted up. First off, like, it didn't even really mess with the clear coat at all. The only areas that were damaged were the ones that I scraped into really hard. So that one's on me really, not even on the paint stripper. Now the ducktail fits up pretty well, and there's a couple things that we're going to do. Now I want to mold this ducktail into the trunk itself so it looks like it's all one piece. I don't particularly like the look of having it separate, especially since with the way that they manufactured this ducktail, we wouldn't be able to just double-sided tape on like you would with other ducktails. There's no flat bottom surface. We would have to rivet this in anyway. But another reason is we already have these flares that are going to be very obviously attached onto the car as a separate piece, seeing the rivets and where the kit ends along the edge. And when I see people do that with the ducktail as well, it looks good, but it just looks like it's just a bit much. So we're going to be molding this in and making it look nice and smooth. Now we have one very helpful area and one speed bump already. The helpful area is the bottom of this ducktail. There's a bigger lip that runs along the bottom, so I could tuck this right under the edge of where the trunk is supposed to close. So we're going to be able to base where the ducktail goes off of that bottom lip. That's the good part. The bad part is this ridge along the end, and this doesn't allow the front to sit flat on the ducktail. You can see there on the far corner that the lip is sticking up a bit, and what we're going to do is we're going to trim this ridge off so that way this piece is flat. This way we could lay the front down nice and smooth, and the fitment will be that much easier for us. So we're gonna go ahead, trim that up, get this attached, and then go from there. Well, at least I could say this video has some riveting content. With the rivets on, we now know where we need to trim some more. Now the issue is this part right here is hitting the side of the car every time we close the trunk, and we can't have that because that'll continue to scratch the paint more and more, especially when we repaint this. We don't want to be scratching our brand new paint. Secondly, this part of the ducktail is sitting a bit low now, so this is almost resting on the headlight right there, so we need to trim this up just a bit. We're getting the same exact issues on the other side where it's bumping right in there. So the next step in the ducktail is to trim off the edge here, trim along the back, get the back side riveted up so that way the ducktail doesn't have any flex, because right now that moves a bit, so if we put filler over that, that would crack quite easily. Well, as it turns out, you need to have your microphone on in order for sound to record. But what I was saying was, we got the rivets in the back, so this is all solid, which means that when we lay filler on the front here, we're not gonna have any issues with it cracking. Now, there are still some gaps right in the middle here. You can see how this gap is a little higher. That's because I don't like to just rivet every single inch along the ducktail right away. I try to start with the bare minimum of holes drilled into the car, and then we work our way up to what's necessary. So we will be doing filler rivets in between here, so that way this is perfectly flush. But that's it for this video. We got a lot lot done. We got the flares filled. These parts are shaped up to where we want them to. Still need to put a rivet on that one. And the door edges are smooth. And we now have a ducktail on the back of the car. Now we are really just getting started with the project and I'm super excited. For any of you who haven't checked in a long while, I haven't posted too much, but on the community tab of YouTube, I actually do polls to kind of see the direction of what you guys want me to go with this car. So if you ever want input on what areas you want to work on next, if you ever want to say, hey, this is what I think, what you should do to the car, what you shouldn't do, blah, 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 do it in the comments. Or if you ever see one of those voting polls, give me a vote so I know what you guys are thinking. Also, another reminder, merchandise. It's not well worn like this sweatshirt, but we have those new editions up now. The link is the first link in the description below. Go ahead and check those out. Thank you guys so much. If you enjoy the content, consider subscribing, liking, and having a donut. I don't know what the last part of that is, but I'll see you guys next time. Adios.